central bank digital currencies are becoming increasingly controversial, at least in the US, where several presidential candidates taking strong stances against them. And meanwhile, in the rest of the world, 130 countries are exploring a CBDC, according to the Atlantic Council. Emily, you've been tracking what's happening across the world in Japan. It's the world's third largest economy. Does Japan have any plans to issue a digital yen?
So Japan has no official plans to issue a digital yen. The Bank of Japan has said that they very clearly that they don't have a specific plan to do this. However, they are still further along than, say, the United States, for example, because Japan has been conducting sort of proof of concept, pilots, technical tests. So basically their stance is that they have no official plans as of now, but they need to be thoroughly prepared in case one day they do decide to issue a digital yen.
Do we know if there's actual demand for it? I mean, we don't see any real Japanese yen stablecoin. So do people need this?
Yeah, great question. So there's actually two questions in that question. So the first is there actual demand? No, I don't think there's demand for it in Japan right now. I think that Japan's position is that there's no demand for it right now, but they need to be prepared in case there's demand in the future. And I think according to their definition, what demand in the future would look like is if for some reason cash would become less prominent in Japan. Japan's kind of interesting because it does actually have a lot of digital means of payment, but it also is a very cash heavy society. So I think the idea is that like, as long as cash is around, it's fine. But, if cash diminishes, then they would consider issuing something like a digital yen. As for the stablecoin question, stablecoins had been effectively banned in Japan until very recently. It's basically just June of this year that stablecoins are now allowed are allowed in Japan for the first time. So I think that's going to be an interesting shift in the Japanese crypto world.
And how does it compare to the rest of the world where other CBDC projects are ongoing? How does Japan differentiate itself?
I think I would just say that the Japanese conversation about the digital yen is fairly calm and measured. It's not like in the US where there's a lot of panic about it and people are talking about it as a tool of surveillance and states are talking about banning it. So in Japan, it's a little bit, I would put it this way. There's not a lot of strong support for it and there's not a lot of strong opposition for it. They're just kind of trying to be thoroughly prepared, testing it. I think they are emphasizing privacy. They've emphasized that if there were to be a digital yen, it would be intermediated. It would be directly from the central bank. So I'd say it's a fairly calm conversation about the digital yen in Japan.
The other thing is that we've actually seen how Japan's way of going about the digital yen is slightly different from some of the other parts of the world, where they've almost publicly acknowledged a very public government-facing and private partnership where these private companies are kind of helping the government almost openly, which is not really happening in some parts of the country. Can you shine more light on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't say that Japan has never done any partnerships, but I think it's definitely like a little bit of a quieter initiative than we've seen in other parts of the world, like China, for example, that is very advanced, and even Europe. We're seeing Europe will probably move more rapidly in this area.